welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes Podcast, episode number 35, with the gaming news from the 22nd of May, 2023. For anyone who hasn't been here before, is listening to this the first time, every weekday morning at 9 a.m, we go through all of the gaming news that I can find from across the internet, as well as talk about, what's going on with games that I'm playing, like Call of Duty. Often we end up going back to that, and I'm sure we probably will today. If you want to see this live recorded and you want to get involved in the chat and stuff like that, it's at youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes. Or if you want to watch it later, you can watch it there, or you can listen to it on your normal podcast services. Right, this morning, we're going to start off just talking about the things that I've been playing over the weekend, really. And it's mostly, surprisingly, I finally got around to playing Zelda. I finished my Formula 1 2022 campaign. I enjoyed that very much. Like, I had a good time just sort of learning all the racetracks. It's the first time I've finished an entire season of Formula 1 2022. Started off as a driver for Haas, managed to get a few points, impressed people enough to move up to McLaren. Then at the end of the season, I managed to get Chico's seat from Red Bull, which is a pretty good sort of career move to go from Haas to Red Bull in one season. Pardon me. But yeah, so that was pretty exciting. I'm excited to play Formula 1 2023. We're going to have some content on that coming soon. Watch this space. And then because I finished that, I finally had time to play some Zelda. And I think I'm getting into it. Last night was the first time I sat down to play Zelda. I did a bunch of the story. I went and sort of finished one of the areas. And, and when I say finished it, I haven't done every little thing. But I've done like the main story beats in one of the areas. And it kept me up. I was like ready to go to sleep, but I was like, I'll just do one more thing. It just started getting its hooks into me. And that's quite good. I want to like Zelda. I know it's a game that people care a lot about. As someone, I used to say my favorite game was Ocarina of Time. I absolutely loved Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. And Link's Awakening to maybe a slightly lesser extent. I was like absolutely in love with the series back then, but I haven't loved what it's become since. And Tears of the Kingdom is just slowly getting hooked into me. There's a lot of really clever things going on in it. There's lots of really clever designs. There's lots of really clever little moments where it's like, sometimes I think I'm sort of outsmarting Tears of the Kingdom, and I think like, oh, they didn't expect me to do this. And then you get there and you realize, oh no, they definitely expected me to do this. They prepared for this exact eventuality. And that happens a surprising amount, where I do something, I'm like, this is amazing. And then later I find that there was a quest to do the exact thing I just did. But yeah, it's fun. It's good. It's been interesting, like both me and my wife played it, sort of excited about it. And I just haven't felt the urge to play it that much. My wife just seems to get irrationally angry whenever she plays it. Like she gets really, really annoyed with that game in a way that she doesn't about other games. My wife isn't like new to video games or anything. Like, she's, platinumed Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal and all of the Fallout games since Fallout 3. She's done a huge amount of gaming, all the Bioshock games, stuff like that. She very much plays games, used to play a lot of Call of Duty, but there's something about Tears of the Kingdom that just makes her angry, like really, really angry. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd one, that. I've also been playing a little bit of Silica, which is a game I saw in one of Jack Frag's videos and I was really excited about. It's like a kind of real-time strategy game, but you get like one commander on each team and everyone else, or not everyone else, but a lot of the other units are controlled by people. And you sort of jump from unit to unit, following their commands. A bit like Command & Conquer Renegades, people remember that, or Battlezone, I suppose, to a lesser extent. It is, I would say, not very good. Like, I think you need to be on a big Discord where loads of people are talking and people are giving instructions and stuff like that. Otherwise, there's not very much strategy going on. There's a lot of aimless wandering. And a game like that where you kind of need 32 people in a lobby all communicating, I worry that that's kind of destined to fail. I think that's, part of the reason why there's some amazing first-person shooters out there like Hell Let Loose and Squad that have done fine. Now, don't get me wrong, they've done well for themselves, but they've never broken into the mainstream, and they never will. And Arme as well. And I know that, people say, oh, it's because they're realistic, they're hardcore and stuff like that. I'm not sure if it is. I think, like, people could deal with that kind of thing. I think it's more that to get the best out of them, you need a lot of people communicating. And it's just super hard to get a bunch of people communicating together, especially people who get on with each other. It's really hard to find that. I've been thinking about this so much lately, and like I'm starting to think I might even make some little project to try and find a solution to it, of just like how do you get people to play a game together on voice comms? Like, how do you get a group of people? If you decide you want to play a game, you want to spend an evening playing a game with people, all chatting, how do you find those people? It's really hard. Like, I tried running some custom Warzone games on Saturday, and we only managed to get 2 games off the ground. I'm quite impressed we managed to get 2 games off the ground, because you need 50 people in a lobby to do that. And we did one, like, normal game, and then we did one game where we tried to say, okay, so you start a pistols only, and it was kind of an experiment on my end of, like, are we going to be able to get people to follow the rules? And the answer is basically no. Like, you can probably get 80% of the people to follow the rules, but there's going to be a lot of people who don't quite understand what you said, or people who weren't quite paying attention, stuff like that. And when you don't have enough people, you can't, like, kick people just because they weren't doing what you wanted. So it becomes very, very, very difficult to do that. But we managed to get a couple of games running anyway. And it had all of the same problems that anything does when you're doing that. It's like, it's hard to get people about. Even people who have said that they're going to be there aren't necessarily there because, you know, life gets in the way. Other things are more important. And then, like, when you actually get it going, trying to get people on voice comms is really hard. Trying to get people chatting and talking because people are inherently quite shy. I think especially gamers, there's, like, probably more shy people in gaming than there are in some other hobbies. So it's quite difficult to do it. But when it works, it's really fun, you know? And we had, like, a lot of, after we finished the Warzone, we did some custom multiplayer lobbies, and they were easy to fill because we had 50 people for Warzone and then only 16 spaces for the multiplayer. And having full lobbies for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer was tons of fun. I really enjoyed it. Just playing gun games and stuff like that. Having a full lobby where I recognize people's names and stuff was so, so good. So yeah, I might sort of work on that quietly over the next few weeks of just trying to see if I can find some way of making that a thing that happens. I think you're always going to have difficulty trying to convince people to do it. And I think one of the big problems that makes it even harder now than it used to be is that, other than the fact that we're all old now and that people have lives, is that so many games have built their systems around progression. Built their systems around, you know, making battle pass progression, leveling up weapons, getting XP, getting your stats to be as good as possible. And then when you play private games, like, none of that matters, obviously, because they don't want cheating. And so it means, like, sometimes I think it's quite hard to convince people to come play a private game where it's like, you know, what will I get out of it? What are the rewards? Nothing. Like, you know, I know last weekend we had some COD points to give away. This weekend we're going to do Warzone Customs again this Saturday. No special rules this time, just straight games. But that's going to be happening this Saturday, and there's going to be prizes again. But more prizes this time, bigger prizes, in fact. And yeah, like, that's something that I'm, like, excited about doing. But I just kind of wish that it was more like, hey, the prize is, like, having some fun. You know, you go for a board game night at your friend's house. You don't, like, say, hey, what the prize is going to be. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I don't know how other people live. But yeah, like, I'm hoping that we can get something like that going. Because there's so many games where I'd just love to be able to fill private lobbies. Like Riders Republic, basically any racing game. Lego 2K Drive, Forza Horizon, F1 2022 or F1 2023 when it comes out, and then games like Call of Duty and Titanfall. It would be so cool if we could get, like, private games going where we've got full lobbies. Like, just, you know, the game as, I would say, the game as it's meant to be played. And I feel like there's not many games we play as they're meant to be played, if that makes sense. I don't think there's many games, multiplayer games, that people play as they were intended to play. And I think that's where a big disconnect comes from when games come out and then they do a lot worse than expected, is if you have, like, a game that needs 64 people playing it, like, you know, Battlefield or something like that, and then you have a development studio where you can get a big group of people playing and they all know each other and they're all chatting and they're doing their test sessions and are like, oh, this is loads of fun, you know, this is amazing, you know, sort of like, oh, there's Steve's squad over there and there's Amanda's squad rushing in, like, oh no, Tracy killed me again, and all that sort of stuff. It's, like, super good fun when you're playing with people that you know and people that you can chat to. And then you put it out into the public and suddenly no one knows each other. Like, everyone's a stranger, so the only thing that's there is competition. There's no kind of friendliness there. There's no chatting. There's just competition. And then people aren't really talking, and if they are, a lot of those interactions are quite toxic, again, because everybody's strangers, people are anonymous, people like to, you know, people who maybe don't have a lot of power in their own lives, I know, like to try and exert power in the online sphere. And it's kind of, it ruins a lot of those games, I think. People always used to laugh when at E3 conferences, Ubisoft would often have things, when they're showing off Ghost Recon or Splinter Cell, or not Splinter Cell, sorry, The Division, or Ghost Recon, or something like that. They'd have these things, where they'd be going through missions together in co-op, and everyone would be like, oh, there's an enemy over there, I'm going to set up my sniper, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's laughing, being like, no one talks like that online. Like, no one really engages with the game in that level. Like, no one kind of role plays as they're playing the games. But maybe they should. Like, that would be a lot of fun. If I could find a group of people, if I could find 3 other people, and they were like, let's go through Ghost Recon Breakpoint together. We're all going to be like, try and stay in character. We're going to take this super seriously and like, but still have a laugh along the way, almost like a Dungeons and Dragons thing. That would probably be the best way possible to play that game. But like organizing that, trying to be like, hey, I need 3 people who are willing to donate, 50 hours of their time to have an experience with me in this game. Like, that's a big ask. Like, that's a difficult thing to ask from people. And yeah, like, I don't know, if people have ideas for solutions for that, let me know. I'm thinking of doing, like I said, I'm thinking of doing something, whether it's like, an app or a website or something, just trying to think of some way we could get this where people could organize this kind of thing. But I don't know. Even MMOs, like any MMO, if we, like, as a group, how many people are online right now? Like, watching this podcast. So right now, there's 23 people watching this. If all 23 of us, all of us, just picked an MMO, and I feel like it wouldn't even matter what it was. We could play like Star Wars: The Old Republic, we could play Terra, we could play World of Warcraft, we could play Final Fantasy 14, whatever it was. If all 23 of us right now picked a game, load it up, and we're like, okay, every evening we're going to play this game, like we're going to go through it, we'd have the best time. Like, we'd make a guild together, there'd be enough people where we could take on all of the content in the game, we could do raids and stuff, we could do dungeons, have different groups, do PvP, all of that stuff, and it would be incredible. But just nobody has the time for that. Like, nobody has the time to commit to video games like that. It's pretty rare. I feel like the Venn diagram, where you've got people who have enough time to properly commit to a video game, and people who are socially, adept, people who are able to get on with other people. The crossover between that is pretty small. Like, the little line in the middle of people who are sort of like socially competent, who also want to spend so much of their time playing video games, unfortunately, there's quite a small crossover. And that means a lot of the time, if you just play with random people, you have bad experiences. A lot of the time, if you pick up a random group and you're talking, they're going to be someone who you don't get on with. And that sucks. That's difficult. I would say, like, when I've done games where you have to talk to people, like Destiny 2 raids, and I've done like, pickup groups, so I've just found them on the Destiny LFG tool and things like that. I would say 8 times out of 10 that it's been okay. 4 out of 5, I guess. 4 out of 5 times it's been pretty good, and I've got on with the people and they've been okay. But then there's always like one person, or there's always that one group where you start playing with them and you think, oh yeah, these people are okay, and then one of them starts making racist jokes, or one of them starts being really sexist, or one of them starts just like screaming and getting really toxic and angry. It's like just one person is an absolute douche, or sometimes you come across a group where all of them are, and it's like, never mind. Like, this is why I don't play games with people online. That's a shame. I've always been a bit of an idealist when it comes to games, and I've always had a bit of like a mindset of, I would love to have, I'd love for there to be a solution to this. I'd love for there to be a tool or a website or a thing that the consoles do or that a gaming company does that makes it easy to find other like-minded gamers and have a good time. But it's just really difficult. And I've had too many experiences of playing with people and being like, oh, actually, I don't want to talk to you, that it makes it very awkward, the idea of, willing to go on voice comms with someone. Most of the time, I'm just on my private Discord rather than being in game chat, because it's just a bit scary. Today, after this stream, I think I'm going to have a go at doing some Warzone ranked solo, because Flynn's back at work, so I don't have teammates anymore. So I might do some solo queue, and I might just start talking to people, and let's see, we can see how it goes, like see whether we can communicate with people, and how that goes for us. It'll be, it might be interesting. We'll see. But it's difficult. Anyway, that's the games that I've been playing. Let's get on with the news. We've been going 15 minutes before we actually got to the news. I'm sorry. Maybe I should switch that around and go to the news first next time. Let me know in the comments. Do you think I should do the news first rather than talk about games I'm playing? So we've got quite a lot of news this week. It's really interesting, actually. When I was looking at this last night and I was sort of planning this, I do a little, agenda type thing, and I'm professional. And I was like, there's not actually that much happening. Like, there's no announcements or stuff like that. But then I've been digging, and I think I found some stuff that's worth talking about. So here we go. First of all, yesterday, it was 10 years ago to the day that the Xbox One was revealed. Lots of people were talking about this on Reddit, a few people on Twitter. And looking back at the Xbox One, and it's really difficult for me because, as you know, a lot of you will know, I seem to be very contrary in my opinions about gaming, and that's not a new thing. It's not something that I've done since I'm a content creator. I don't do it to get engagement. Just for whatever reason, I'm massively out of step with the gaming community. I seem to think something different to a lot of people, and I'm sorry about that. But the Xbox One was a really good example of that. That was one of the times where I felt massively detached. That they did the Xbox One presentation where they showed off what it was. And I was like, this is awesome. This is really cool. I was really excited. I liked their whole digital first thing. The whole thing about, you can buy a game on a disc and then you put it in your Xbox once. And after that, you'd never need that disc again. You just have it like unlocked on your console. Back then, before, everyone started buying games digitally anyway. That seemed very cool. Like, that seemed like something I really liked. I liked all of their things, integrating Kinect a little bit better and using all of the voice controls. I liked all of their stuff about, hey, you can have like a window in Windows, so you can have like a YouTube thing going on while you're playing something. If you're doing something a bit grindy and boring, or you're waiting something, you can just be like, talk to Kinect and be like, hey, Xbox, can you put on a video for me off YouTube? And it would just come up on your screen and do it. I liked all the stuff they were doing with like game recording and sharing and streaming straight from your Xbox. There was so much cool stuff that I thought about that presentation, about that first presentation. And I was like, oh, that was really good. As someone that preferred the Xbox 360 massively to the PlayStation 3, I had both, but I preferred the Xbox 360. I was like super hyped to, go online and be like, oh, I can't wait to see what people are saying, see all the hype for the Xbox One. And then I'm hit with this wave of negativity. Like, hit with all of these people being like, that was the worst presentation ever. Like, oh my God, Xbox is dead, blah, blah, blah. And that hasn't gone away. Like, it's been 10 years now, and people still look back at that press conference as a complete disaster. And, the way Sony reacted to it, where Sony were like, did a video being like, hey, this is how you share games. Because Xbox have been like, you can share games on Xbox, but it'll have to be something where like you have to sign them up as part of like your friends network, and then they can use it, but they can only use it for like 10 hours or something. Or I don't know, there was some complicated thing. And on PlayStation, they were like, this is how you share games with friends on PlayStation. And one of them's got things like, would you like to play the game? And then they give them the disc, and then they're like, there you go. Now you've shared it. I can confidently say, not once have I ever lent someone a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 disc. Not once have I ever said to someone, hey, do you want to play this game? Here's my copy of the game. Never happened to me. But on the Xbox, where you can do the thing where you set each other's home consoles as each other and you can share consoles, did that a lot with Xbox One. Did a huge amount of that. I do it now with my wife with the Xbox Series X. Our home consoles are each other, so all the games I have, she can play, and vice versa. It's like, so the stuff that Xbox One was pushing back then, now I do daily. Stuff that PlayStation 4 was pushing, didn't care about at all. It was just a weird thing. And, people have made a big deal of it since, being like, oh, Xbox One, they were going down this whole, like, route of people using their consoles for, like, streaming services and video and music and all of this sort of stuff. And, like, implying that people would not, people want to have digital-only libraries and stuff like that. And they were saying that you needed to connect your Xbox to the internet every 28 days to validate your account. What about people that don't connect their consoles to the internet? And now, like, looking at consoles, like, it seems like, at least in Europe, I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, most video game sales are done digital only. Most people are playing online games. If you look at the most played games, it's, overwhelmingly online games. And, most people can get the internet at least enough to do, like, a little console check-in. That doesn't mean you need good internet. You could use mobile phone internet or whatever to do a phone check-in. It just seems a bit like people were harsh. And it's like, the guy who was presenting, I can't remember his name, was that Don Matrick? The guy who was presenting the Xbox One definitely didn't do it any favors, where people were like, what about servicemen and women who are off in Afghanistan and Iraq? Like, they don't have internet connections. How are they going to play that? And he was like, well, they can just play the Xbox 360. And like, comments like that didn't help. That wasn't great. But it did feel to me like it was an unnecessarily harsh response, and it's something that's happened again and again and again in gaming, where a narrative gets picked up, like a narrative like, oh, this Xbox presentation sucked, or this game sucks, or like, I've talked about it before on the podcast, the Star Wars Battlefront 2 thing, where people are like, this pay-to-win thing is the worst thing that's ever happened in gaming. And I just don't think it's true, and it's like a massively overblown response. But because it gets picked up and people want to be part of like the cool group, people want to be part of the, the group that people agree with, people go along with that without really, I don't think, doing much critical thinking, without really thinking about it. And the same thing's happened in Warzone, I strongly believe all of this stuff. Can you remember, like a month ago, when in Warzone 2, loads of people were being like, oh, the servers are constantly crashing, the servers like are in a terrible state, and it's because of all of the AI on the map, they just need to get rid of the AI and then the servers will be fine. And then it's like Season 3 Reloaded came out and the servers are mostly fine, and the AI haven't changed at all. And it's like, remember when everyone was on that big bandwagon? Remember when everyone was like talking about that as if it was a fact? And then it's like, seems like they fixed it, but it wasn't the AI. It's like, it's a weird kind of thing where people just pick up a narrative without having to think for themselves, and they see it from someone they trust, they see it from like a figure of authority, so they just roll with it. And those narratives do have, because of the way social media works, they have a kind of real power that companies, it doesn't matter whether what they're saying is true, it can change people's spending habits, it can change people's, what people spend money on, and it has a real effect. And I think the Xbox One was a real early victim of that, like of being like turned into a meme online. Like Sony managed to do a good job of kind of controlling that. And I think people were just really unfair to it. And I think the Xbox One ended up being a fantastic console. It was a really good console. It definitely struggled with exclusives. It didn't have the good exclusives that the PlayStation 4 did. PlayStation 4 ending up with like Last of Us Part 2 and Spider-Man. Obviously fantastic games. And then, the Xbox One had, like, I don't know, I'm struggling to think, some of the Forza Horizon games were good. Sea of Thieves, I guess. Sea of Thieves was good. But it's like, there's not that many spectacular Xbox One first-party games. So I think eventually, it made sense that the PlayStation 4 did better. But I think at that launch, it was just a really, really clear example of people picking up this weird narrative and not thinking about it too much, but just going with it. And it just not making sense. All of the stuff that they were talking about for the Xbox One at launch ended up being the way that people play consoles. Like, that ended up being completely correct. They were right about basically everything, I think. Maybe, bundling Connect with it wasn't necessary. They could have made it a bit cheaper if they didn't do that. But generally, I think that they got it spot on about people wanted a sort of digital... I think people, in the end, wanted a digital library. Like, that was the thing they were really pushing for. But because of the way the internet turned on them in those early days, it just kind of completely spoiled that, which sucks. And I still maintain that the PlayStation does all of that stuff much worse. I think the way they handle their digital library, the way they handle the PlayStation Store, the way they handle basically everything on the online version of PlayStation, I think is much worse than the way they do it on Xbox. But, people don't care because people are just like, Microsoft's bad and Sony's good for some reason. It's kind of annoying. I just thought, this isn't connected to my next news story, but I thought I'd mention it. Tommy Gannon was just saying, off topic, but did anyone see the new PlayStation 5 control pad for people with disabilities? First of all, is it real? And if so, that's a brilliant idea. How has it not been done before now? This is a really good example of what I'm talking about. I've seen this exact sentiment lots of times, like loads and loads of times, where people have been like, oh my god, look at what Sony's doing for disabled people with this amazing controller. Like, why aren't other companies doing this sort of thing? And it's like, they did. Like, this is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This is something that Microsoft brought out years ago now at this point. Exactly the same kind of idea. There's inputs for every single one of the different button combinations that you'd want to use, or different things, and you can plug in things like, tubes that you can blow in, or track rollables, or switches, or whatever people need to fit their various accessibility needs. It's just something that happened a long time ago that they did, and now Sony have finally announced something that is real, like PlayStation are doing something, and it's good to have more things like that. But it is essentially what Sony's done is exactly the same as the thing that Xbox did years ago. But because of the weird narrative about Xbox, it's just not there for whatever reason. It's a little bit strange. I'm not sure when exactly did the adaptive controller came out. I know I saw it a very, very long time ago. But when is there like a Wikipedia page for it? There we go, Wikipedia page. It came out 2018, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Xbox did the adaptive controller. But yeah, now Sony are doing it. Everyone's like, oh my god, aren't Sony amazing for it? And it's like, yeah, they're really amazing for just finally, it's for taking 5 years to copy something that Microsoft did that was obviously a really solid thing. It just annoys me. I know I come across as a bit of a Microsoft fanboy, an Xbox fanboy, and I think I kind of am in a way. Like since the PlayStation, I owned a PlayStation 3, and then PlayStation 4 and 5, I bought them at launch, and I've just never really liked the consoles. I've never liked the controller. I've never liked the UI. I've never liked, like, whenever you see the Sony executives talking, they always seem just like a bit slimy kind of businessmen, as opposed to like Phil Spencer, who seems to actually care about gaming and actually seems to be like a fairly decent guy and talks quite candidly about all this stuff. And it's like, undoubtedly, PlayStation has had better first-party exclusives. And then people like look at Xbox and are like, well, what's the point now? Xbox put all of their exclusives on PC too. And it's like, yeah, that's great. As someone who plays games on console and PC, I love the fact that I can get all of my Xbox games on PC, like all of the first-party games. And they often have cross-progression. They more often than not have cross-progression and stuff like that. I don't see that as really a downside. And then, I look at the PlayStation exclusives and it's like, yeah, how many of them are actually really, really good? Like, on the PlayStation 5, I don't think we've had a really good, like, PlayStation exclusive, other than maybe the Astrobot game that came with the console. That was good. But everything else has been kind of okay. And, like, they did so many games that are so similar. You look at, like, Days Gone and Horizon and Last of Us and Uncharted, and they all share quite a lot of DNA. Like, I would say as much as a lot of those Ubisoft games do that people make fun of them for all being the same, all being about climbing up towers and stuff. A lot of the Sony ones, they're good, on God of War as well, but there's a lot of third-person action-adventure games with light RPG elements, not much choice in them. Open worlds you can kind of explore and do some side quests that aren't quite as good as the main quest. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of similarities. They all look nice, though, so that's good. And some of them have okay stories. Some of them have good stories. Last of Us Part 2, very good story. But all of the others, kind of similar. And then you see, like, Microsoft are doing crazy things. Like, Microsoft are like, what about Hi-Fi Rush? What about Sea of Thieves? What about Grounded? What about Pentiment? And they're doing, like, all of these crazy things. Like, being a bit more experimental. And I think just as a gamer, that's kind of more what I'm into, is someone doing weird, crazy stuff. Yeah. No, Tommy Gannon, it's definitely, not enough people know about the adaptive controller. It's like $100 as well, which isn't that bad. Like, for that kind of thing, I think 100, where obviously that's not going to have the big market that normal controllers have. I think that's going to be pretty, like, good value. I don't know if they've said for PlayStation how much that's going to be. Project Leonardo. Have they said how much it's going to cost? No, just images of it. I can't see how much the Sony one's going to be. Not that it matters too much, I suppose, although it's good to make it as cheap as they possibly can. Obviously, because it's an accessibility thing. Hopefully not something where they're just trying to make a crazy profit on it. Right, let's go on to the next proper news story, and that is that Ubisoft have announced that they are really focusing down on Assassin's Creed. They're going hard on Assassin's Creed in the future. So Ubisoft have always been, and I've talked about this on a podcast a million times, Ubisoft have always been a company that innovate. And people, again, seem to miss that. There's this narrative going around that Ubisoft just make the same games over and over again. Like, oh, they're just making another Far Cry. Oh, they're just making another Assassin's Creed. And it's like, but they also make For Honor and Roller Champions and Trackmania and Riders Republic and Just Dance and, Rayman Rabbids and stuff. Like, they make so many awesome, like, weird games and, like, innovative games, and people don't buy those games and people don't play those games and they don't talk about them. All people bloody buy is Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, and then they wonder why, like, people think that they have this impression of just Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. But anyway, now Ubisoft is saying they are going to double down Assassin's Creed. I can see why. Like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, despite not really being a huge critical success, I don't think that many people loved it compared to other Assassin's Creed games. It's made an insane amount of money, like an insane amount of money, like really, really huge. And so it makes sense for them. So I think they've got lots of like games in a pipeline. They've already talked a little bit, you know, they did that presentation where like, we're going to be getting Assassin's Creed Mirage this year. Then we're going to be getting that like Assassin's Creed Hex and Assassin's Creed, was it Red or something like that? There's a bunch of other Assassin's Creed games kind of in the works at once now. And by the sounds of it, they're different styles. You know, Mirage is more of a back to basics, like Assassin's Creed 1 kind of thing. Then you've got one of them was going to be like more of a multiplayer focused thing. Some of them are going to be more like, I get by the sounds of it, like connected to this Assassin's Creed Infinity hub. That they're doing lots of things within the Assassin's Creed universe, but they're sort of trying to make them a little bit varied, which they've done before. You know, like we've had it with the Tom Clancy games, obviously, where you've got like Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon and Splinter Cell, and they all go in different like branches, but they're all loosely connected. You know, they all have a sort of shared universe. I think they want to make Assassin's Creed the new like Tom Clancy's universe and have different styles of game within the same world, which, you know, I'm like, I don't mind. I like Assassin's Creed games. I was really excited about Valhalla. I played through it all. You know, it's like a big game and I still played through it all. But I'm not like over the moon about them being like, oh yeah, we're going to do even more Assassin's Creed stuff. It's like, oh, I kind of wish you'd do something new. But oh well, why not? I guess that's the thing. It is interesting when like you hear about what's happening with their other games. Like, you know, games like Roller Champions didn't do particularly well. I think they've said that they're not doing new stuff for that. I'm not so sure. Riders Republic, I still don't think gets the attention it deserves. Skull and Bones, there's been someone saying that like, oh, I think Ubisoft said over the weekend that it's not going to come out in early 2023 now. And it's like, well, it is May now already. You know, we're nearly halfway through the year and it hasn't come out. So yeah, obviously it's not coming out early this year. It's like, is Skull and Bones actually going to come out? Like, are they going to finally cancel it? There's always been like, it's just speculation, but speculation that they can't cancel it because the Singapore government put so much money into it that like they have to release something. But it's like whatever they release for Skull and Bones isn't going to be great, and so they're in a weird situation with that. It's like, do they just keep on spending millions year after year developing it, or do they just kick it out the door and let it die? It's a weird kind of thing, a weird kind of situation, but I wish people would support Ubisoft's weird stuff. Like when they do their big announcement thing, their big showcase on the 12th. So it's like what, 2-3 weeks? They're doing their big showcase. Yeah, 3 weeks about. They're going to do their big showcase, and I really hope that there's, on top of, you know, there being probably some new Far Cry and probably more about Assassin's Creed Mirage and probably more stuff for like Rainbow Six and whatever. I really hope there's something new. You know, I hope there's some new IP, new take on something, that they keep that idea going. I think The Crew 2, they've been talking about that, haven't they? So that'll be there. Splinter Cell reboot, I think that's meant to be still coming out. Yeah, hopefully they do something new as well. Hopefully they do something a bit weird. Speaking of other sort of game announcements, Arc Raiders has switched from being a co-op shooter to a PvPvE extraction game. So if anyone who doesn't know Arc Raiders, this was a game that was announced a while ago. It was by the people who are making the finals as well, Embark Studios. It's got some developers who worked on Battlefield and stuff like that, work for that company, and are working on it. And originally it was announced as a co-op shooter, and I think, you know, that was a time where there was quite a lot of these kind of co-op shootery type things, where, you know, there was Outriders was obviously quite a big one that came out, and then stuff like the Avengers that was kind of that kind of similar kind of thing. And then, I don't know, they were probably working on it when things like Anthem just before that came out. And then now they've been like, actually, we're not going to do a co-op shooter after all. We're going to make it a PvPvE extraction game. And it looks cool. Like the little bits of concept art and stuff like that they've shown off does look very, very cool. It's got a really nice art style. It looks a bit more maybe polished than a lot of other things do. Just trying to see if I can find their Twitter, because that's where they've got some of the stuff. But yeah, like they've done some little like videos and stuff like that look kind of cool. They are accepting playtest signups, so if you want to sign up for their playtest, then by all means do. Like, that would be cool. Right, this is their trailer. I'll just leave it on in the background. But yeah, it's got a cool like vibe where it's almost like that retro futurist thing, you know, of this is what people thought science fiction was, you know, this is the idea of science fiction from the 70s, but then with a bit of a modern twist with the sort of decayed mechs and stuff like that. Don't know, it looks fun. I would say, oh, flamingos as well. I would say I'm a little bit worried about any game where it's from, you know, a sort of untested developer. Although the finals tests and everything, beta and everything was really good. But it's from a kind of unknown developer that we don't know how that's going to end up turning out. And they've shifted what type of game it is. That's, I think, a little bit weird. That sounds to me a little bit like they don't really know what kind of game it is and they're chasing trends. Now, obviously, sometimes that works. Fortnite, you know, Fortnite wasn't a battle royale game when it came out. And then they pivoted to that and it ended up being massive. So it definitely can work, but it's just kind of, it sets off red flags in my head where I'm like, this sounds a little bit like, yeah, they don't really know what the sort of core of the game is. Hopefully I'll be wrong. Hopefully it will be a lot of fun. I think, did they have some gameplay? I think they did on YouTube, man. I'm just muting it so we can do it. There we go. Here's a little bit of gameplay. So I'm just putting that up for people who are watching on video. You can see a little bit of the gameplay. And, you know, it looks pretty. It looks cool. Like, look at those fancy lighting effects. Look at that. Like, they're fighting some little drone things that are chasing them. I do always think of stuff like this where there's, like, little sort of weedy-looking drones. I always think, if you're playing the real game, aren't you just going to shoot them? Are you actually going to run away? That's another thing, you know, that when I was saying earlier about gameplay trailers, where people show off games and they show off a more fun way of playing it, but not the way people actually play it. Where in real life, people just like find the most efficient way to do something, which is often just holding their ground and shooting and then moving on when it's clear. But whereas in these games, it's always people running away from enemies. And it's like, how many games do you really run away from enemies? That seems pretty rare. I'd love it in DMZ imagine if in DMZ you actually had enemies to run away from a lot. You actually had like more than just players, but you had like, you know, oh, you're fighting a group of AI, but then 2 trucks of AI turn up and they're, you know, chasing you down. So you need to get out of there. That would be a lot more fun, but it just doesn't happen because it's just too easy to take care of them. But yeah, I thought Arc Raiders sounds interesting, little bit concerned about it. I was playing a game over the weekend, actually. On Friday, I streamed a game that was called Ascendant. And this is a sort of extraction shootery type thing. You can go watch the VOD on Twitch if you want to. It's very, very unfinished. Like, the textures and stuff weren't done or anything like that. Although, worryingly, while we were playing, they were like, how ready do you think this is for early access? And some people were like, oh, if you sort out this, it'll be a 5 out of 5. And I'm like, really? Like, really? This is ready? Like, it seemed super early to me. But one of the things that really concerned me there is they were going on, I was like talking to the developers while I was playing, and they made a really big deal of like, they did the whole spiel that lots of companies are doing at the moment of, you know, oh, I think like the way that we're different is we're really like listening to the players, we're listening to player feedback and we're making changes. You know, we want to release it really early so then we can have like all of that feedback, get players telling us, you know, what they want to see and stuff like that. And immediately that's just like a red flag for me. Immediately that's like, oh, you don't know what you're doing with the game. You don't know what you want this game to be. Instead, you want a bunch of random people to decide for you. Like, that's worrying. And, you know, you've heard this from like the Midnight Society people, like the Dr. Disrespect game. Epic tried it with Unreal Tournament and it, you know, got cancelled and sort of failed horrifically. It happens quite a lot with these sort of, you know, mid-tier sort of like bigger than indie but not quite AAA studios when they're making these games where they come out into early access and they're like, oh, we really want to work with the community, we want to hear what the community wants, blah blah blah, and then it just ends up with something that's really bland, or ends up with loads of features that never quite get finished because the community always wants more features, but you know, polish is a much harder thing, and the game ends up with kind of feeling aimless, just kind of feeling like it doesn't really have a core, or the developers are just lying and they don't really listen to the feedback at all. You know, I'm a strong believer, and again, I've said this lots of times, I'm a strong believer in creative vision for game developers and, you know, movie directors and TV producers and everyone. But like, I like the idea of playing games that were made by someone who has something interesting to show the world, or has something interesting in their head that they're getting out. I find that much more interesting than the idea of like a game where thousands of people have all had their input and they've tried to please everyone. I just don't think that's going to work. I think, that's one of the big problems of Call of Duty, is that they've tried so hard to try and please the community, and then the community just like turned out. The community don't care even. The community turned out like, they never listen to us. They're never doing what we want. I saw a comment from JGod yesterday on Twitter, or this morning, where he was like, sort of like, oh, it's crazy that, the Call of Duty developers never go after the low-hanging fruit. And it's like, it feels like the Call of Duty developers have done so many changes based on things that people have asked for in the community, and the community is just never happy with them and just moves on and ignores it. Like, as soon as something gets done that the community wants, they just never speak of it again. And it's just kind of, it's weird, like that kind of odd entitlement it breeds, where they're like, well, you listened to us about the Gulag, why aren't you changing this? And it's like, oh, just don't do it. Right, sorry, I just saw randomly Codstar pop in saying Jedi Survivor is brilliant, makes COD look like poo. I mean, Mace's COD look like poo, but I think he meant makes. Okay, that's a weird take to have with what we're talking about, but yeah. I'm glad lots of people are enjoying Jedi Survivor. I thought Jedi Survivor was a bit crap, personally. I didn't really like it very much. But it's a very different game to Call of Duty, a very, very different game to Call of Duty. It does make the campaign look like, the Call of Duty campaign look much worse in comparison, but then so does any single-player game, because the Call of Duty campaigns aren't very good. Right, anyway, let's move on to the next news story. And this is just for the upcoming games. There's not many games coming out this week. I did look at the list, and it looks like upcoming game release dates. It looks like there's a bunch of kind of, indie-looking games. I'll run through some of the ones that come out this week, so stop me if there is one of these that you know of. But there is Inkbound, After Us, Blooming Business, Casino, Glitchbusters, Stuck on You, Miasma Chronicles, Planet of Lana, Puzzle Bobble, Every Bubble, and Star Trek Resurgence, Dark Quest 3, Cassette Beasts, Death from Above, Do Not Feed the Monkeys 2099, Hello Good Boy, Hello Neighbor VR. All of those games are games that I don't really know much about. Oh, and then One Piece Odyssey, Celasta, Crown of the Magister, Palace of Ice DLC, Tennis Manager 2023, Forspoken in Tantal We Trust DLC, Home Sheep Home, Farmageddon Party Edition. There's a lot of games there where I kind of, some of them I've heard the name, probably because I've been sent press releases and stuff like that. I know Cassette Beasts, I think that's one that's coming to Game Pass. Planet of Lana, I've heard something about. That might be a Game Pass one as well. There's a few of these that I've kind of heard of, but none of them that I'm excited about. The only game that I think is really, really notable to me that's coming out this week is Gollum. Lord of the Rings Gollum is coming out on May 25th, which is, I want to say Thursday, is it? Yeah, Thursday. So on Thursday, Gollum's coming out. This is a game that people have been talking about for a very, very, very long while. It was revealed back in 2019, so it was revealed 4 years ago. And there's been quite a lot of delays. So, it's got close to coming out a couple of times, and they've started doing previews and stuff. I think they let some press play it. They even got to that point at some point. And then they keep on delaying it. And it's like a weird thing where I know it's got dialogue choices, it's got some stealth and stuff like that. It's being made by Daedalic, who do, they're known for like point-and-click adventure games rather than, going around and doing like third-person action stuff. It's going to be strange. It's going to be a weird one. I know, like, in some of the advertising, I'm just looking at now, they sort of big up ray tracing and stuff like that, which, don't know, do I care that much about ray tracing in a Gollum game, in an action-adventure? Well, sort of like just adventure game, maybe. But the main mechanic seems to be about, like, you controlling Gollum and sneaking through stuff, and then him having choices to make, and you kind of deciding whether to go with, like, Gollum or Smeagol, good Gollum or bad Gollum, whether you're going to do that. Not sure about it. To me, the game trailers haven't thrilled me. The game trailers haven't made me super excited about this game. They have reached out, so I think I'm going to be getting a code for this. I think I'm going to stream this at some point towards the end of the week. So if I get the code on Thursday, I will play some on Thursday. But yeah, I'm not like super thrilled about it so far. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe it'll be a surprise. Maybe it'll end up being really good. Maybe it'll be really exciting. But so far, I'm not super excited about it. Moki just said, just talking about new games, V Rising got a massive update a few days ago. Yeah, I saw they had that. Where's the V Rising update? Secrets of Gloomrot. So yeah, that was released a few days ago. Was it 17th of May? So 5 days ago. It's like a $20 expansion to it, where apparently they have, what have they added? They've added a new area, Gloomrot, a massive new zone with 2 unique areas. And they have mechanical things and mutated experiments, apparently. And then they've also changed some of the world that already exists. So they've like fixed a load of stuff there to make it a bit more interesting. New points of interest and stuff. There's weather effects now. So there's lightning storms sometimes. There's trading hubs. So you can swap some of your stuff with the NPCs and things like that. You can build new floors. So you can go up. And there's 13 new bosses. Anyone who doesn't know V Rising, it's kind of all about the bosses. You go and hunt down these bosses, and then you get their blood, and that gives you a new ability. It's a pretty cool game. Like I don't know, either Cobb or Flynn, one of us. I think me and Cobb were playing through V Rising. Yeah, because it's on Xbox, it's on PC, isn't it? So me and Cobb were playing through V Rising, and we got to the last boss and then stopped playing because it just seemed like a massive slog. You had to do a load of stuff just to prepare to fight it, and we like died twice doing it. And I was like, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I've seen everything the game has to offer, but there is a new expansion out. It's good to sound that it's good. I would say what Moki's saying where he says it's like Minecraft meets Diablo. I would maybe I would maybe say it's not. I wouldn't go that far. The building is much, much, much simpler than Minecraft. It's much more like you place walls and floors and ceilings and then you put some items in them. There's not really much more to the building than that. But you can kind of build in lots of different areas. You can kind of build not quite where you want, but close. But it is a lot of fun. And I also say the combat isn't as good as Diablo. Like you're not fighting stuff in quite the same way you are in Diablo. But it's interesting enough. There's lots of abilities, lots of like ways that you can customize the way you fight of different weapons, different abilities and things like that. It's a fun time. It's a fun time, V Rising. Definitely worth a shot. I can't say like, even though I played through all of the base game, it wasn't interesting enough that I've been interested in playing expansion. Like it just didn't grab its hooks into me. I don't want to spend more time in V Rising, if that makes sense. Right, the last few news stories, because we are running out of time a little bit. The PlayStation Showcase is on Wednesday. I was going to stream this, but I'm not going to now, because I've got to have a little bit of surgery on Wednesday, on the end of my tongue, of all places, which will make talking quite hard. So I'm not sure. It depends how I feel. There might not be a podcast on Thursday, depending on how I feel by then. But yeah, I'm definitely not going to be streaming the PlayStation Showcase. It was interesting. I was listening to the Kind of Funny podcast, and they were talking about Last of Us factions, and they're really hyped about that, about seeing what that is. For anyone who doesn't know, it's like Last of Us Part 2's multiplayer. Originally, they was like, oh yeah, there's going to be a multiplayer aspect to Last of Us Part 2, and then they delayed it and said it's not coming with the main game, and then they've been working on it for ages, and they actually came out and said, oh yeah, we've been working on this before we started working on Last of Us Part 2 single player. So it's been something they've been working on for a long while. From the concept art and stuff, some people have predicted that it's going to be like an extraction shootery type thing. That there's going to be, some element of, interacting with other players, but also having to fight in the environment and stuff. Should be fun. Should be exciting. I'm quite excited about it. They were making a really interesting point on the Kind of Funny podcast where they were saying about how it's really weird from a big game fans perspective, someone who's really into gaming, there's some studios that are really, really good and their games are really good, but normal people don't play their games. Like, if you talk to normal people about gaming this year, what games would they have played? I mean, Zelda is the big one. Like, loads of normal people play Zelda. I know normal people who don't play any other games all year, but they will play Zelda. They'll play a bunch of Zelda. They're really excited about it. That just sort of penetrated through. They also play Call of Duty. They'll play like Warzone. They'll hop on Warzone with their friends, and that might be the only game that they play is Warzone. And sports games like FIFA and Madden, NBA 2K, those sort of games, they're the sort of games that penetrate into the mainstream, and lots of people get excited about them. And then you get other games like, Elden Ring, where normal people don't really play it. Like, that's probably the closest games like that I've got. But I think normal people don't care about From Software. They don't care if there was a new Silent Hill game or a new Metal Gear Solid game. They wouldn't care about that. Games that would be huge for people who are into gaming, a new Half-Life 3, still I don't think would sell anywhere near the same as like a new Zelda game would. It's just like, it's interesting how these things like penetrate. And they were talking about how you get some developers that make things that are like, you know, like Insomniac made things like Ratchet and Clank, and they made Sunset Overdrive, and people knew they were amazing developers, but like they didn't ever crack into the mainstream. And then they made Spider-Man because it's attached to the, you know, the Spider-Man license, and suddenly that's huge and they love it. And I think people expected that with Crystal Dynamics and the Avengers, but obviously it didn't work out because the game wasn't very good and it wasn't that closely tied to the films or anything like that. And you know, people in the podcast, they were talking about they hope that happens with Ubisoft Massive, because they worked on a Division games, but now they're working on a Star Wars game. It's like, the Division games are pretty amazing games, and it's like, but now they're working on a Star Wars game, maybe that'll be the thing that pushes them into the limelight. That'll be the thing that pushes them into the mainstream. The spotlight, not the limelight, the spotlight. Maybe they'll be pushing that. And they were talking about Naughty Dog and how it's interesting that like Uncharted and The Last of Us really are still very much a gamer's game. You know, they don't sell the same number of copies as something like Zelda, or Call of Duty or anything like that. And, you know, no one expects them to. And even though everyone like knows Naughty Dog are an incredible studio, they're still only a studio that really sort of gamers know about. But because of the HBO show, because like HBO show's done really well, and like now lots of normal people like Last of Us, if Sony are going to announce a big Last of Us multiplayer game, especially if it's like free to play or something, because they said that they've got a load of these games as service things coming out. If next week they announce that, they're like, hey, we've got a Last of Us game coming out, it's going to have an open beta or something, or it's going to be free to play, or maybe they'll even shadow drop it, it'll just be out next Wednesday. If they do that next Wednesday, that could be huge. That could be the thing that makes like Naughty Dog get mainstream. They could sort of like get elevated to that high tier, which would be really, really cool. That'd be good for them. And I'm excited about it. You know, if they do an extract shooter, I've obviously got a bit carried away just sort of speculating on what Last of Us factions could be. It's like, now I'm imagining, oh, maybe like you and your friends run like a little community, like you have your own little town, and then you have to go out and scavenge resources, but then you'll come up against people from other towns, almost like an MMO type thing, you know, like Rust or Conan Exiles or Ark or something like that. And then you'll come up against other people, and then you'll have to fight over resources or make, you know, alliances or something. And maybe there'll be like dangerous zones that you go into, and it's like the dark zone in the Division. And you get better stuff from there, but it's more dangerous. Like, that's completely me speculating and making stuff up in my head. But in my head, that game is awesome. That could be so very cool. But we'll see. You know, I think we probably will see that game on Wednesday. It's one of those games like Spider-Man 2 that I'm just expecting to show up on Wednesday. And I'm really hoping it'll be one of these shadow drop situations where it's suddenly like, oh yeah, it's out now. You know, maybe that's why we don't have any other big games coming out this week. Then we've got one other news story, and then a couple of little bits I wanted to speculate about. The one other news story is not a huge amount, not hugely interesting, but I think it touches on an interesting topic. Diablo 4 content is coming to Diablo Immortal. Now, I saw this headline this morning, and then I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Diablo Immortal, and I reinstalled it. And the reason I didn't ever play, you know, as someone that loves Diablo, I really, really love Diablo 1, I love Diablo 3, I didn't really play Diablo 2, just was in a busier part of my life back then. But I played Diablo 1 and Diablo 3 a bunch, super excited for Diablo 4. I was like, why aren't I playing Diablo Immortal? You know, it's a Diablo game that you can play on your phone. It controls pretty well. It does feel like you're playing Diablo 3, essentially, on your phone. And then I remembered that a lot of the things that didn't seem that good about it, a lot of the things that seemed a little bit kind of tedious in Diablo Immortal, wasn't stuff that I had experienced. And it's going back to that thing that I was saying about people, you know, hating on the Xbox One without really thinking it through, people hating on Star Wars Battlefront 2 without thinking it through very much. I think I did the same to Diablo Immortal, that it came out, and I remember there's a big thing about you get gems in the game. And if you want to power up your character to like the maximum level, you power up your character by leveling up and you get better items, stuff like that. That's all fine, that's all free. But to get like the most power, to hit like the peak, the pinnacle of power, you have to combine gems. And then getting gems is really hard. Like getting the high quality gems is really hard. And one of the ways that you can do it is by, you know, paying real money to get like a loot box style mechanic where you get like a random gem and there's a better chance if you pay real money. of getting the high quality gems. And then, so if you pay loads and loads and loads of real money, like people were spending tens of thousands of pounds on this, you could get like the best gems, and then your character would be the strongest they could possibly be. And then you could take on the hardest content in the game. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. Like always doing something where you're progressing, but always knowing that someone who's paid will always be ahead of you no matter what. That sucks. And that made me uninstall the game. That made me stop playing it. And then it's like looking back on it, I'm like, I've never been at the peak of power in a Diablo game. I don't think I've ever played a Diablo game to the point where I'm as powerful as I could be. Like not once have I ever hit those upper limits. I've always played it to the point where I have fun and I go through all of the content, but I never end up competing on the leaderboards for, the highest, greatest rift challenged in Diablo 3. Or the highest, the fastest hell clear in Diablo 1 or something like that. I've never, ever engaged with that. And that's what these people are doing. These people who have spent insane amounts of money on the game, they were just people who wanted to, like, compete at that very highest level, wanted the bragging rights or whatever, wanted to make the content of being, like, the strongest people in Diablo. It's like, I don't care about that at all. So why aren't I playing this game? Like, why don't I bother playing with it? It's not like something like DMZ's pay-to-win stuff, where DMZ's pay-to-win stuff, you get affected by other people having that. I've been annoyed by that. Me and Flynn played a game where we went and pushed a team and we'd killed one of them. There were only 2 left in the house. There's just me and Flynn, so it's just 2 of us. We went to go push, and then it was right to start the game, and they immediately, even though they didn't have armor or anything like that, they had a UAV, and they put a UAV up, knew where we were, and killed us both. Like, we would been trying to flank from either side, so they picked us off and killed us. And it's like, oh, and then when they killed us, we could see that they were the skin where you get the free UAV every game, and it's like, oh, well, that's kind of annoying. Like, that's kind of irritating that they got us with that. In Diablo Immortal, what someone else is doing, someone else's progress, doesn't affect you at all. Like, it doesn't matter. It's a co-op game, so it doesn't, like, bother you in the slightst. So, yeah, I don't really know why I stopped playing it. So I've reinstalled it anyway. I'll give it another go. I'll give it another try. It's just kind of interesting, sort of how you can get wrapped up in the narrative about, like, this is terrible, this is awful for the game. And I just didn't think about it for myself. I was just like, yes, it must be awful for the game, so I won't bother. I won't bother trying this. And then, that's what happened. Right, the other couple of news stories I'm going to run out of time for, so I am going to push those off for maybe tomorrow. But let's go quickly through some of the comments. We've had a few comments of things that people are saying. House UK 1975 earlier, just talking about when people sort of, summoning up these narratives that are negative about something, said the worst thing is organizing other people. He was talking about trying to get lots of people to group up together. Yeah, organizing other people. But he said, at this point in my life, trying to organizing spoiled internet babies or edgelords in a game is not what I want. I miss guilds or clans, but I'm not managing one ever again. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, the idea, like I was saying earlier about getting people to play a game, like on Saturday when I ran the custom Warzones game, it's like the idea behind it is fun, but inevitably you get people who aren't happy. Inevitably you get people who are complaining about stuff. You get people who want you to do something about something that happened. They'll be like, oh, well, this person seemed to be cheating, or this person wasn't following the rules, or this person wasn't doing this. And it's like, what are you going to do about it? And it's like, well, we were just having some fun. I don't want to have to do anything about it. I don't want to become this arbitrator. I just wanted to get everyone together to play the game. But yeah, it always happens. It's the same reason I don't really like running competitions on a channel. If some company gives me free stuff to give away, I'll do it. But because, it's good for engagement and blah, blah, blah. Although I'm still a bit dubious about that. But I'm always a bit reluctant to, because I know it's going to cause aggro. I know people are going to complain. People are going to whine. Like, people just aren't happy. If you run a competition and then someone doesn't win, they're now going to be annoyed with you about it in some way. Not necessarily, but some people are. And they get annoyed with you and they ask you for, like, proof of things, or they ask you for, like, like, question how you did it, or they complain about the way you did it. They start getting really arsey. Like, whenever I do one of those streams where I know I've got stuff to give away, I always start getting those people coming to my stream. And then they start saying things like, does he ever read the comments? Doesn't he engage? Wow, what a crap streamer. He doesn't even engage with comments. And it's like, I do all the time, but I wasn't for like 5 minutes while I was doing something in the game. Like, people get like weirdly angsty about stuff like that. And it's really, really annoying. And it just puts you off doing it. And organizing the Warzone thing was the same. I was trying to get 50 people in a game to play some custom Warzone together. And we had like a couple of people not really following the rules and stuff like that, but it ended up souring the whole thing, because then I ended up people like insulting me basically in the stream, being sort of like, oh, well, like, you know, you're bad for doing this or whatever, or just being snarky about stuff. And it's like, oh, well, this has just completely killed the vibe now. This has killed the enjoyment of the whole thing because there's just this bit of negativity in it. I need to kind of get better at just ignoring those people, but I think I've got it in, you know, inherently I always want to try and make everyone happy if I can. I want to try and make everyone in the audience happy, but it's very, very hard to do. And then House also said Internet Dogpile. Redfall was the last victim. Not a great game, but nowhere near as bad as Internet would tell you. What will be the next target? I mean, Redfall's a really interesting one. I did get that feeling for a long while that like, oh, you know, people are being unnecessarily harsh on it, blah, blah, blah. And they were. But also, when you look at the Metacritic for that game, it's like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. It's like, that's where I would say Redfall is. I've finished Redfall now. I played through the whole game in co-op. Played through it, basically the sort of ideal setup for playing through it. And I still would say, yeah, it's like a 5 or 6 out of 10. It was fine. It was okay. So it's like, at least the reviewers kind of got it right. It was just more the, you know, the hate on the internet of like, this game's trash, blah, blah, blah. That brigade kind of ruined a lot of the fun of that game, I suppose. Right, I think we're pretty much done. So, thank you very much to everyone that's been watching today. I am going to hop on over to twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. So if anyone wants to follow me over there, do. We're going to try and play a little bit of Warzone Ranked. Not sure how long I'm going to keep it up. I haven't tried queuing solo for Warzone Ranked yet, so we'll see how that goes. But thanks so much everyone who's been watching today, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.